For those fellow Hooties who watched my previous videos, you know that I absolutely hate Robert Big Bob Beeper King Pataki and his smoothie slamming wife Miriam, and how they basically neglected Helga and are basically the reason she is the person she is, while at the same time showering their first daughter and Helga's older sister Olga with praise and putting her on a pedestal of golden perfection, to where she feels like she has to be everything Bob and Miriam praise her for and more, and while doing so caused Helga to resent her because, one, Helga is constantly being ignored by her parents.
Daddy, who's gonna take me to preschool?
Yeah? Oh, yeah, sure. Come on, play us another one, Olga.
For Olga, concert pianist at 15, class valedictorian.
Hey, who's taking me to preschool?
Yeah, in a minute, Olga.
No, I'm Helga, Dad. Helga.
Whatever.
Now I know there are more examples of this, but I'm gonna use these examples as they're important to the video, and in my hooted opinion. Also, I want to make this clear, this is my opinion on the matter. I'm sure there are plenty of videos that have discussed this topic, but I want to throw my wing in the mix and give my thoughts on the matter. Now, with that being said, let's begin. Chapter 1, Big Bob. Over expectations and outright neglect. Out of the two Pataki parents, I would have to say that Big Bob takes the cake as the worst of the Pataki pair. And I doubt it's hard to see why. Despite Helga being similar to Bob in almost every way,
Hey.
Sing, hey.
Bob still has little to no idea who Helga is and her interests. Oh, but he remembers everything Olga likes. It was when he saw how miserable she was in the episode Quantity Time, which I'll come back to this episode later when discussing Miriam. But he tried to take her to the place she wanted to go, WrestleMania, but instead got tickets to see Rats, which, to give him credit, was thoughtful of him to do, which he never did again. And yes, there are moments where he is seen to be somewhat a competent father. I would say it's too little, too late. He still favors Olga over Helga. He still neglects her most of the time, and he always still calls her Olga. Every time there's a school competition, he pushes her to be like Olga and win. But you can't force your kids to be their elder siblings. They obviously have different interests. And I'm gonna bet that Bob and Miriam manipulated Olga into being the best at everything, and she probably thought that they pushed her on such a high standard that she became conditioned to it and brainwashed to the point where not getting an A+ would send her into an existential crisis, leaving her bedridden for days, her will destroyed, until Helga told her that she changed the grades, which there is no defending Helga's actions, regardless of how you feel about Olga. And I'm sure a lot of you Hooties don't share Helga's feeling of resentment and jealousy, even when Olga tells her that basically she isn't the only one that struggles with having Bob and Miriam as parents. Helga gaslighting Olga into moving to Alaska to tutor the kids there. I always hated this. Olga wasn't the one that wanted to be perfect and a know-it-all and everyone's favorite. Bob and Miriam put her there, and since they hold her to such a high regard, Olga feels that she has to always be perfect for them, or else disappointing them. We don't see Olga's childhood, just Helga's perspective of Olga as a teen, so we don't really know what she went through until then. For all we know, they might have been great parents to Olga, but I highly doubt it. I'm willing to bet there was a lot of manipulation being done to Olga at a younger age, maybe even when she was Helga's age, when she went to preschool. and it was probably Miriam that did most of the psychological damage to Olga. She might have pushed Olga to do everything she wasn't able to do, like those crazy pageant moms that try to live through their kids. I know that's a lot of probablys and maybes, but it wouldn't surprise me if any of that was just slightly true. I know this part is about Bob, but I thought it right to bring it up here. Again, Big Bob is the worst of the parents. He's the one Helga respects more, which isn't saying much, as she calls him and Miriam by their first names, since they don't really act like parents, just adults that live there. Bob, the only one making money around the house, and I don't know, it's never been brought up, but I'm surprised they never mentioned Bob being abusive. I know it's a kid's show, but it doesn't mean they never tackled dark subjects before. Maybe that's one of the only good, if only good, trait about him. He's just verbally and emotionally abusive. Speaking of which, I think it's time to get our blenders ready as we get to the second Pataki parent.
Miriam!
Chapter 2, Dazed and Smoothied, Miriam's Drunken Existence. Yes, I'm sure everyone by now is fully aware of this, but it has been confirmed by Craig Bartlett that she is a secret drunk, mixing her alcohol in her smoothies. You obviously don't see her with any bottles, but with her constant sleeping on the couch or at the table and always looking like she has no idea where she is 90% of the time, it's clear she's an alcoholic. More than likely because of Bob and how her life ended up, and she went to drinking as a dependent, and like Bob, she neglects Helga, calling her Olga, and even forgetting to feed her, and even her husband. That, or she mixes up their lunches.
Moist towelettes, an individual packet of crackers, and a can of shaving cream.
How am I supposed to run a beeper empire with my face smelling like hickory smoked cheddar, Miriam?
I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that Miriam isn't really happy about her marriage to Big Bob. Probably even when Olga was little. They seem to only get along when they talk about how perfect Olga is. But instead of giving Helga the love and nurturing that they gave Olga, which I'm sure was them pushing her to be perfect, they completely ignored her and acted like she never existed.
Come on, play us another one, Olga.
I know. How about the Minute Waltz by Monsieur Frédéric Chopin?
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, you should hear her play Beethoven, Miriam.
Can you believe her, Olga? Concert pianist at 15, class valedictorian?
From the very beginning, they gave Helga zero love or affection. They would rather love bomb Olga while ignoring their 3-year-old daughter that actually wants to go to preschool, and you can't even bother to give your other daughter any kind of attention? You know what? I'll say something that might get some heat, but I don't hootin' care. I bet one of the reasons why they treat Helga the way they do is because they didn't want Helga and choose to ignore her just to focus on Olga. I mean, if you really look back and think about how their marriage went after Olga left for college and they were stuck, as they probably think, with Helga, that might put a strain on Bob and Miriam's relationship. You can't tell me that the second Olga left for college, Miriam took one look at Bob and Helga and said, "I need a smoothie," and never went 10 minutes without one since. Well, that might be an over-exaggeration, but you still get what I'm saying. The second that Olga left, then they only had Helga. Big Bob and Miriam became miserable. I dare you fellow Hooties to tell me that I'm wrong. Sorry. If I can give Miriam any, and I mean just a small amount of credit, I can tell that Miriam does care about Helga more than Bob does. And I won't lie and say that neither of them care about her. I'm just saying that if they had to choose between Helga and Olga, and one of them would have to fend for themselves, which, let's be honest, Helga already had to do that ever since she was little, like a regular Matilda. They would pick Olga in a hooting heartbeat, even though she can very much get her own job in place of her own, considering she's in her early 20s. Then again, Helga could more than likely get a job faster than Olga, and she doesn't even have a degree in anything. And she's 9. Anyways, Miriam does seem to care about Helga slightly more than Bob does. And yes, Helga and Bob do act the same. It's obvious that he cares more for Olga than her. He's the one that doesn't say Helga's name right most of the time. The Season 3 Episode 7B, Road Trip, is a good example of them bonding, which I have to say is a lot better than the episode Quality Time. See, I said I would get back to this one. The second Miriam finds out that Bob and Helga are going to be home for the break, Miriam abandons them and runs to their mommies, leaving them alone. And I know I said that she cares about Helga slightly more than Bob. This proves just how much of a pathetic person Miriam is, that she couldn't be there with them in their house. What kind of an incompetent mother are you? What? You couldn't handle the fact that you had to do chores Bob had for you? You can't be a mom for Helga because she acts just like Bob, and by the time Olga left, you can't stand being around Bob? You just run to your room and call Mommy. Son, I bet she's the one that told you to go there so you can avoid responsibility and drink it up like a fish in water, while Helga has to deal with the uncaring Bob that tried feeding her strawberries.
I'm allergic to strawberries. They give me hives.
And yes, Bob does make efforts to be a better father. I know this, but the fact still remains that the damage is already done. And a few acts of kindness doesn't erase all the damage they did to Helga growing up and throughout the series. And no, I don't mean when they got Helga the Nancy Spumoni snow boots, that she ended up giving up to help Arnold find Mr. Wynn's daughter. Honestly, Helga giving up the boots that she's been wanting the most in that episode proves she's already a far better person than either Bob or Miriam. But yeah, Bob did get upset when he realized that it was Helga and not an alien that he was choking in the Halloween special, an episode I covered on Hootoween, and he was about to search the city of Hillwood when she ran off in Arnold's Thanksgiving, which it really should have been called Helga's Thanksgiving, because honestly, I don't like how Arnold didn't understand that just because he wasn't celebrating what he thought a true Thanksgiving should be, doesn't mean he didn't have a family that loved and cared for him, and a grandma that was senile. Anyways, back to Helga. Bob and Miriam do care enough for Helga to where, I guess, they can be considered somewhat competent parents, but again, that doesn't say much. To wrap up this chapter, I'd have to say that even though Miriam cares just a little bit more than Bob does, that doesn't mean she isn't a mess in her own right. I mean, Season 4, Episode 19, Summer Love, aka Pete's Story, or the Baywatch episode. By the way, if you want me to discuss that episode in a future summer or spring review, let me know in the comments. Miriam and Susie are offered a stimulating free dance class by some Casanova named Carlos. And sure, you can tell me that he just gave them dance lessons and nothing else. I won't believe you, but you can still tell me that. And you know what? Good on them for that, for taking part in the free dance class. I mean, look who Miriam and Susie got. One's a big beeper blowhard, and well, Oscar is...
Make me a sandwich. All I want is a sandwich. What about me?
I'm not saying this is really the case. I mean, it's a kid's show. But if this is hinted to have happened like Miriam being a secret alcoholic, would you really blame them? Let me know in the comments as well. With that being said, let's move on to the next chapter. how the Pataki parents have affected Olga and Helga. Yes, I'm going to include them both, as Bob and Miriam's horrid parenting has affected not only Helga, but Olga. Not in the same way, mind you, but just let me cook, and I'll explain how the constant praise from Bob and Miriam can cause someone to feel like they have to always be ready to perform and be perfect at any moment's notice, or feel like you let your parents down. But if you don't believe me, let's hear how Olga feels about it.
You must think I'm lucky. All the attention I get from them. I have to perform all the time like some kind of wind-up doll. I get really sick of it. You're lucky they don't even notice you.
Chapter 3, The Cost of Perfection, Olga Pataki. So this won't be as big of a chapter compared to Helga, but I'll try to explain the best I can how the constant praise from the Pataki parents can cause more harm than good for the older Pataki sibling. Aside from what Olga stated previously, she got tired of always feeling like a wind-up doll, that she has to be ready to perform at a moment's notice, but to always have the best grades, or always be the best at anything, and take multiple extracurriculars, and never have a moment to yourself, but to always occupy your time with something, because even when you're not at home, you always have to impress the parents that expect nothing but perfection from you. And you can't just marry anyone. They have to always be perfect too, and if Miriam and Bob don't approve them, well, sorry Charlie, or whatever their name is, but you can just kick rocks, because Olga has to have that perfect life. And you see the problem there? Also, what Olga says about her dating life kinda speaks about how her expectations are too high.
And I'm dating one boy who's in pre-law and one boy who's in pre-med. I just can't decide which one I like better.
Now this might be because I'm not, well, Olga, but it seems that she can't be happy with anyone unless they're as perfect as she has to be. But that's just how I see that. And I know I mentioned this before, but all you have to do is look how she reacts to getting a B+ and not perfect grades to see what happens when she doesn't get the perfect result she was expecting. Whether it be anything school related or anything in her life, she falls apart and is rendered bedridden for days. And if it isn't a prank by Helga, imagine how long it would take for her to get herself out of that dark place. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but she clearly was never ready to handle the fact that there's always someone better at something than her. And that's because her parents forcing her to be the best but never help her in the off chance that she didn't get first place. This, and they never considered how this could affect how Olga sees her sister. And I'll be honest, I'd probably feel the same way if I was ignored by my parents and they constantly reminded me how perfect my older sibling was. And I have to be as good as them to always be in their shadow. But I'll get to that when discussing Helga. Since we don't see much of Olga, we don't know much about her character aside from what we see or hear from either mostly Bob talking about the many trophies she received, or from what we see in her appearances. I can really only speculate on how much Bob and Miriam's constant praise has affected her and wanting to be the perfect child they expect her to be. But someone we do see a lot of is none other than Helga Geraldine Pataki. And now we get to the chapter I'm sure you fellow Hooties are most excited to get to. How Big Bob and Miriam's neglect and poor excuse of parenting has affected Helga, and how her as a character was made as a result, and the environment around her, and those who encountered her, and the obsession that she developed for a certain football-headed boy that was the first person to be nice to her. Let's get to the fourth and final chapter. Chapter 4, Helga Pataki, how neglect can confuse love with obsession. What can I say about Helga that we already don't know? Well, She's bossy, hot-headed, selfish, mean, prone to violence, and she cares about her true feelings, and underneath it all, that hard exterior hides a vulnerable person that just wants someone to appreciate them the way she never was from the two people that should. But instead, they put all that into Olga, and that neglect not only hardened her to lash out at anyone that made fun of her, but to cling on to the first person that showed her the smallest amount of kindness. Thus brings me to Arnold.
Hi, nice bow. Huh? I like your bow because it's pink like your pants.
Now I know I'm gonna get a resounding, doy, bucko. Like we don't know Helga is obsessed with Arnold. Even she has mentioned that her love for Arnold borders on the obsession. Well, I would say that her love isn't in fact love at all, but just obsession. Let me cook, okay, if you don't believe me. Or you already do agree. Anyways, from the beginning, we see Helga's goo-goo eyes for Arnold, which have lasted throughout the series, and we also know about the sacred shrines that Helga has assembled to Arnold throughout the series, ranging from a headdress to a literal effigy made entirely of his used bubblegum. I feel this could be the result of Arnold being the first boy that has ever been nice to her, and maybe the first person that was ever nice to her. I don't know if she would have acted the same way if, for instance, Phoebe would have been the one that handed her an umbrella, or any other boy. Heck, what if it was Harold was the one that was nice to her? Would she have become a bully like Harold, or would she still become the same person? Even helped Harold become less of a bully and... Nah, that would never happen. Maybe it was destined for our favorite football-headed protagonist to encounter Helga when they did. For Helga to meet someone as nice as Arnold so that she could slowly learn to be a better person. But of course she still has to keep a front to the others so people don't think she's a pushover, just like her old man. She isn't the nicest to her friend and considered psychic Phoebe Heyerdahl, which, weirdly enough, comes from the Old Norse words meaning hay, and dal meaning valley. That means Keo Heyerdahl's father must have been Norwegian. Sorry about that random rant, I just thought it was an interesting bit of hooded trivia to share with you fellow hoodies. Anyways, yeah, she's not really nice to Phoebe, treating her more like a secretary than a friend, and being possessive over her, like no one can be friends with Phoebe but her, which I think is a result of how she was neglected by her parents. She's probably afraid that if Phoebe gets other friends outside of just Helga, that she won't want to hang out with her anymore, and she'll have no friends. Unlike Harold, she doesn't have a Stinky or a Sid that hangs around her like Harold. I mean, there's Lila, but I don't think she'd want to hang out with someone that Arnold, her football-headed obsession, has a crush on. That and they already did this when Helga loses Phoebe in the 6th graders in Season 3, Episode 25B, Phoebe Skips. When Phoebe skips to the 6th grade, and Helga is probably scared that she'll lose Phoebe as a friend, and goes for a search for a new Phoebe, and well...
She asked you to do what to my Caprini cardigan?
Snip the tags out?
You're not supposed to ask her.
I just didn't feel right about destroying Rhonda's personal property without getting her permission first.
Yeah, well, guess what? You're ever so fired!
And even with her being the mean person she is, she's still one of my favorite characters in the show, mainly because she's such a deep and well-written character. Her actions are the result of how her parents have treated her. The closest character I can think of that acts like her, and a similarly complex character, is Harold, the one that you could say was the reason for Helga to put such a mean and rotten shield up to cover the more sensitive side of her, the side that only a few people are able to see, which, ironically enough, Harold has a similar side to him, his desire to be a butcher when he's older, the fact that he's a lot more intelligent than even he understands. And that's because, like Helga, Harold puts up a front for his peers so they don't make fun of him. And also, like Helga, find someone that they could show their sensitive side to, that being Patty. We see Helga able to talk about what she's going through and went through with Dr. Bliss, who was able to slowly break down all of Helga's defenses that was put up on her by her parents, who, what did they say about therapy again?
We Patakis don't talk about things. We sweep them under the rug.
Some things are best swept under the rug, Helga.
Whatever you do, don't blab anything or they'll give us all a one-way ticket to the funny farm.
Yeah, that. It's obvious that they didn't want Helga to talk to Dr. Bliss about the abuse they did to not only Helga, but Olga. But in the other end of the abuse, where Olga was conditioned to feel like she always has to be perfect, to ignoring Helga to the point where she became a mean, possessive, and obsessive person. Now, I don't know how to help Olga move on from what Bob and Miriam did to her, but Helga has Dr. Bliss to talk to and help her deal with her parents. At least I hope she is. We don't see Dr. Bliss after the episode, so I hope she didn't just vanish after saying Helga can talk to her anytime she needs to. It's stuff like this that make me wish that Craig was able to make his Helga spinoff, to really get deep into the Pataki family and how the family has evolved since she was supposed to be 15 during this series. And since Olga is said to be at least 12 years older than Helga, she'll more likely be 27, where Helga would have been accepted in an alternative high school for smart kids, where she apparently was a big hit, and her family loves it. Yeah, that's right. Bob and Miriam would actually give Helga the Olga treatment, and by that I do mean they would probably try and put her in the same pedestal that Olga is on now, and Helga discovers that she not only hates being the center of their attention, but it was better that she was ignored, which is just tragic, since she was ignored basically her entire life, and now that she has her parents' undivided attention, it's because they want her to be the next Olga, or maybe better than Olga considering how she turned out. I really recommend looking up the Patakis on the Hey Arnold wiki. The Patakis are arguably among the worst parents in the series, up there next to the Lloyds, who instead of ignoring their child Rhonda Wellington Lloyd, choose to spoil her, turning her into a spoiled brat. Helga was ignored most of her life because of Bob and Miriam would rather praise and manipulate Olga into thinking she has to be perfect and best at all things, and make Helga fend for herself. And since Bob depends on Miriam for everything, and Miriam is about as useless as she's 10 smoothies in and passes out on the couch or wherever she decides to fall asleep, and leaves Helga with no food or lunch. But even with all that, Helga is able to become a good person with problems, but she didn't just give up, and she became the smart person we see throughout the series. And a good part of it, I would say, has to come from Arnold. Her seeing how nice a person Arnold is, and slowly learning to be a better person, even helping strangers, and not just looking out for herself. She even can talk to Dr. Bliss, who probably helped her out a lot. But since the show didn't mention her after her only appearance, we can only speculate about if she can still talk to her. Anyways, this was my little video essay, you could say, about the Patakis and how they affected Olga and Helga. I'm going to put as much footage as I can for the video, but I don't want to put too much up there. This is more me ranting about how I feel about Helga and Olga's parents, and how their abuse has had a major impact on not only Helga, but Olga. But not many people see that Olga was messed up from always being the center of Bob and Miriam's affection, and Helga basically being treated like she was never there. Because she was more than likely an unintentional birth, and Bob nor Miriam was planning on having another kid after Olga. Again, tell me you don't think the same thing. Thanks for watching this crazy video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I tried to make this video as coherent as possible. As always, you fellow Hoots' opinion and feedback mean a lot, and I can't thank you all enough for all of your support. I want to try and get this video out as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of January. I'm also going to stream more on Twitch, so check out my Twitch for live streams. I just got myself a capture card, and I started streaming on OBS, and it's going good. I can't wait to see you there for streams and in between my videos. And until then, I'll see you when you visit the Owlery again, and I get my hoot in the dark. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, share with your fam, subscribe today and join the Parliament of Hoots, and also comment what you thought of the review. What are your opinions on said episode? Let me know in the comment section below. Your guys' opinion means so much to me, new viewers, and fellow Hooties. Check out the videos below, it'll take you to more of my content, and follow my other social medias, including Instagram, Twitch, and also Twitter, or X. Until next time, guys, I'll see you when you visit the Owlery again, and I get my hoot in the dark.